Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're tracking the absolute wild ride of psychedelics. We're talking about a journey that starts with deeply sacred, structured rituals in ancient human history, crashes through a seriously controversial 20th century, and somehow lands right in the middle of a modern clinical renaissance. We've got a ton of fascinating ground to cover, so let's get right to it.
Here's a wild thought for you. Can a 1,000-year-old ritual actually heal today's modern mental health crisis? I mean, it sounds a bit like science fiction, right? But what we're going to do here is instantly bridge these ancient, earth-based practices of our ancestors with literally one of the most urgent medical problems we are facing today.
To really get the science of today, we have to look back. Section 1, Ancient Healing and Shamanic Roots.
The historical scale here is just massive. Imagine this. 1,000 years ago, deep in a Bolivian cave, archaeologists unearthed this pre-Inca ritual bundle. And what's inside? Traces of psilocin, the active agent in magic mushrooms, and DMT, the stuff in ayahuasca. Then, hop over to the 4th century BC, where ancient Greeks are drinking a psychoactive brew called kykeon during the Eleusinian Mysteries. It's crazy to think it wasn't until way later, in 1943, that Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann first synthesized LSD. Honestly, altering consciousness using psychoactive substances? It's practically a baseline species norm.
But here's the really crucial takeaway. Our ancestors weren't just taking these things randomly for fun. Whether we're looking at indigenous Amazonian groups or Native American peyote traditions, there's this obvious through line. They required a rock-solid, structured container. We're talking extensive preparation and absolutely needing an experienced guide or shaman. They relied entirely on what modern researchers call set and setting. Basically, your psychological state and your physical environment.
So how do we completely lose that ancient context? Section 2, the 1960s psychedelic counterculture.
Okay, so the 1960s happen. LSD escapes the clinic, hits the streets, and the counterculture movement has these very specific goals. Youth rejuvenation, breaking free from the rigid norms of the older generation, and this intense focus on presentism, just living totally in the here and now. But if we look at it objectively, the psychedelic revolution of the 60s kind of crashed and burned. Why? Well, because a true societal revolution actually needs a future-oriented ideological program. You just can't sustain massive societal change on childlike presentism alone.
And instead of overturning capitalism, the mainstream just completely absorbed it. The 1967 Summer of Love ended up being this massive marketing boom. Huge corporations realized, hey, we can monetize this. Columbia Records was literally selling underground rock with the tagline, "The revolutionaries are on Columbia." Even everyday advertisers co-opted that whole kaleidoscopic acid trip aesthetic. There were actual TV commercials trying to convince you that chewing their brand of bubblegum would teleport you to a magical, brightly colored world. The sacred ritual basically became a lifestyle brand, which inevitably triggered a massive cultural backlash and a global ban by 1971.
Which brings us to the present. Section 3, Modern Crises, Deaths of Despair.
Just take a second to process this number. 150,000. It is absolutely staggering. This is the estimated number of deaths of despair happening every single year in the United States alone.
It's an epidemic driven by suicide, drug overdose, and alcoholism. And while it initially hit working-class adults in deindustrialized areas the hardest, it's spreading everywhere now. It is deeply tied to a massive loss of social cohesion, just widespread isolation and disconnection. And obviously, recent global traumas haven't exactly helped. On top of that, pharmaceutical development for mental health hasn't had a major game-changing breakthrough in decades. So these incredibly tragic stakes are exactly why researchers are desperately looking backward to find novel treatments.
Section 4, the clinical psychedelic renaissance.
Thanks to modern brain imaging, we now have this incredible window into how these compounds actually work in the brain. Enter the default mode network, or DMN. This is a network tied heavily to our ego, our sense of self, and our most ingrained habits. When dealing with conditions like severe depression or trauma, these neural pathways get incredibly rigid. Think of them like deep, frozen sled tracks stuck in the snow. You just can't steer out of them. Psychedelics temporarily scramble those rigid networks, promoting neuroplasticity. Basically, it's like a fresh snowfall that fills in the tracks, allowing patients to literally rewire their brains and carve out new, much healthier habits.
But remembering that ancient through line we talked about earlier, you can't just take the compound and wait for a miracle. The modern clinical protocol is incredibly strict, broken down into 3 specific phases. First is preparation, where the therapist spends serious time building trust. Second is the supervised dose, completely overseen by professionals in a very calming, controlled setting. And third is integration,
where the patient actually processes all those wild insights over the following weeks to get that long-term healing. Notice how perfectly this mirrors the ancient shamanic practices: preparation, guidance, reintegration. Modern science is essentially just validating the ancient ritual container.
I absolutely love this quote from Guillermo Aravello, a Shipo shaman from Peru. He says, "I organize the psychological part of the person, which enables me to understand and to see the solution to their problem." It's brilliant because it hits the nail right on the head. Whether you are an Amazonian shaman deep in the rainforest or a highly credentialed researcher at Johns Hopkins, structured human connection is the real mechanism of healing here. The substance is just the catalyst. The relationship is the cure.
Section 5. New Laws and Medical Regulation.
The era of the blanket global ban is finally ending. We are actively shifting toward highly nuanced medical regulation all over the world. Take Australia. Their federal government now actually allows psychiatrists to prescribe psilocybin for very specific treatment-resistant conditions. Over in Canada, Alberta has amended its mental health regulations to properly govern psychiatric use. And down in the U.S., voters in states like Oregon and Colorado have already built frameworks for safe therapeutic access. The law is, at long last, starting to catch up to the data.
The famed psychologist Carl Jung once pointed out that humans have always sought out the sphere of numinous experiences. You know, those profound, transcendent moments of deep unity. And right now, in an age that is so heavily defined by isolation and despair, modern psychology is recognizing that we have an inherent drive for exactly that kind of connection. These aren't just novel chemical interventions. They are returning us to a fundamental, highly structured piece of the human experience.
So, I'll leave you with this to ponder. Is society actually ready to integrate this ancient wisdom responsibly? Can we build a healthcare system that respects the sheer power of these compounds without repeating the absolute chaos of the 1960s? It's a huge question, and the amazing thing is, we're watching the answer unfold right now. Thank you so much for joining this explainer. Keep curious, and I'll catch you next time.